Hello and welcome to Technology for Humans. Today on the podcast, we're joined by Javier. Javier is a software engineer, entrepreneur, consultant, founder of the Ruby Users Forum. That's a lot already. And is an active builder of the Ruby community. The Ruby Users Forum, if you don't know about it, obviously there'll be a link in the notes, but the forum has positioned itself as a modern gathering place for Ruby developers. I guess other than live conferences and so on, we need a place to meet and to talk. And it's also for maintainers, projects, newcomers, everybody tangentially involved in the community. Javier's also been active in bringing projects and communities into the forum and expanding its role as a community hub. Javier, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here and really excited for talking, and thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Obviously, we want to talk about the Ruby Users Forum because it's probably the most important thing that we could talk about at the moment. But I just want to understand a little bit about you first, Javier. You started your journey in Ruby as a developer. Working, being employed for others, which is not a bad thing by any stretch. But at some point you moved on to deciding to be an independent consultant, to be a software developer, going out looking for work. Going back to Ruby, why did you choose Ruby? Like what attracted you to Ruby? Was it Rails or was it something else?
Yeah, so I've been doing software development for around 20 years, so it goes back way. But yeah, I started doing software development, I think in Java and things that were used back in the day. And I started working with several companies as a software engineer. And then I think when I discovered Ruby was because I started working on a startup in Guadalajara that had offices there. And that's where I started discovering it. I learned it on the job, which was a good thing to do. And that was the first time when I started getting involved with the community. I started going to conferences. I started seeing some talks around the topics because I was using it on my day-to-day job, and I needed to learn more about it. And that's where I discovered, this is not only a pretty cool language, but it also has a pretty nice community. Everyone seems to be very nice. And I remember talking with a friend that was leading the Java community back then, and he told me, I told him, I wish we could have a Ruby community here in the city. And he said, well, you should probably do it because you can just go ahead and do it. And that's what I did. I did a local meetup for around 3 or 4 years. I got some other people helping me around, and that was also a pretty nice thing to do because I also got to know a lot of different people from the community, like getting people to get to speak at the events, and then just also talking with some companies to sponsor the pizza and the beers and things like that. So that was my first encounter with Ruby, and I did use it later on. I worked as a consultant for several years using Ruby because I liked it very much, and I continued to work on that. And that's basically how my journey started. And it was, probably 15 years ago. And it was, I think, a very good time to learn Ruby and Rails because everybody was talking about it. And there was a lot of content and information and events happening at that time.
Yeah, and it is a very different world today. We'll probably get to that.
Yeah.
At what point did you decide to break out on your own, start your own business rather than be employed?
Yeah, so I think my last job was because I started being the first employee at a company. So a friend started a company and he invited me, and I was the first employee. So I was in the sidelines because I was not the main, it was not my company, but I was part of the growth of the company. So we went from being 2-3 people to being a 100 company and being sold to another bigger company. So I basically had the opportunity to lead the engineering team, to see how hiring works, to see the different challenges that you have to make, the different decisions between, like, you always want to have the perfect world, but then you face reality and then you have to make tough decisions on how to move things forward. So I think that experience, I worked there for around 10 years. And I think that was pretty formative for me, and obviously very grateful for the opportunity because I was able to grow a lot there. And I think that was my first encounter with entrepreneurship. I mean, I always wanted to do things differently, and I always wanted to change things on the companies where I work, like find ways to do things better. But that was like a pivotal change. And then after that, in 2021, I decided to start my own company. And then I also partnered with the previous person that had invited me. Now he's my business partner, and we're basically doing consulting for founders, builders, so they want to grow their business or be more efficient. And we come in most of the times as a staff augmentation, but we also do some fixed fee projects depending on the needs. And we're right now targeting more small, medium businesses right now.
Awesome. Tell me, was there a period of time in particular, I guess, in that first year or the first 6 months even, where you were like, I'm not sure that this is the right direction, like this is too hard, or this is more than I expected, or anything like that?
Yeah, I think the hardest part is that you cannot blame anyone. Like, so you're the last person that you can blame. So it gives you a lot of freedom, but also you got a lot of responsibility. Like, because I remember, like, when I was employee, it's very easy to say, like, well, leadership is doing things wrong because X or Y or Z. But then when you're there, like, you're making the calls. And I think for me, it's hard because I try to care about things. So I think just finding that balance between really caring about what you want to achieve, but also being very objective and sometimes just finding the best solution with what you have, or having to take the lesser evil sometimes.
What surprised you the most about working as a solo developer?
Yeah, I think another thing that's probably not sure it's surprising, but for me, it was a little bit, you need to get involved in a lot of different things that sometimes you don't think about, or you think they're easy. Just thinking in terms of marketing, sales, hiring,
yeah,
human resources, accounting, like, it's just, you have to be comfortable wearing different hats. And then also finding, lately I've been enjoying a lot the sales and marketing process, because I think you start finding how it can be helpful and how it can be also a tool. And not only, like, obviously when you're a developer, like, your code and building solutions is one way to help your clients, but also like helping them identify their problems or helping them figure out what's the best solution. Like, that's also something that's interesting. So I would say, like, sometimes you have also to do things that you don't like, and some days probably are not the most enjoyable, but I think at the end it's worth when you see the result of the work and you stay true and you keep trying. That, I think that's a good outcome, right? But there's definitely some hard days or difficult days, and also I think probably 80% of the work is just doing things that are not fancy or that you wouldn't publish or talk about, but that are important for the business to grow.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and I think a lot of people say that that point about how you don't expect there to be all of these other hats that you have to wear And I guess instinctively you know it, but a lot of developers go, oh, what, you mean I have to do all of the sales myself? Do you mean I have to work out the tax that I owe? Do you mean that I have to work out the legal ramifications of this project? Because perhaps that was always considered by someone else.
Yeah, and sometimes I think we all kind of understand it, but I think when you actually see all the work and hours that you have to invest to see the results, that's when probably you start saying, oh, well, it seems easy from the distance, but it really isn't, because it is hard work and you need to just do it, right?
Did you ever find it isolating?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was especially hard because we started during COVID, so it was a really hard time because everybody was on their house, and just having to deal with the normal isolation of COVID, but also the isolation of starting a business. But yeah, I think what I have found is just trying to find other groups of people that are building things, or just people in leadership positions. And I think I found some good groups where you can share things, because yeah, it can get lonely because you don't have other people in the company to do it, right? But yeah, I think that's great. And also I think also like having a business partner is good. It can be challenging sometimes because you obviously have to share the vision and the way of work, but also it can also help, like when there's a problem, you can talk about it and you can find different approaches, or you can see things differently and just, tackle it together.
Which is obviously one of the benefits of the forum that you've set up, the Ruby Users Forum. I guess to some degree it solves that problem of isolation. And there's a lot of developers in the world today who are uncertain about their positions. They perhaps feel, if it hasn't happened to them already, perhaps that they might be redundant in 6 months or 12 months, and they're uncertain about where do we go? Like, what is the future? And one of the ways to solve that is, of course, nobody knows exactly what's going to happen in 6 months or 12 months, but being able to talk to others who might be in the same position and just understanding each other is important.
Yeah, I think obviously there's a lot of uncertainty right now. I wouldn't guess where we would be in a year, because I think things are changing really fast. But also I think if I look back, I think there are things that I think won't change, or I hope won't change, which is people talking to each other about what they're doing and how helping each other. I think that's valuable, and that's my bet, is that we can come together as a community of technologists and then figure things out, like talking with others. Because I've always been an engineer, and I love building stuff, but also I think building stuff with people, it's a lot better, right? And I think all the open source communities and all the conferences, and I think that community part of the technology, I have always felt that is very important, and that we should all be investing in trying to make it bigger. And even if we get some great tools that make us super efficient, I think at the end of the day, we're still people working together, right?
Couldn't agree with you more. In fact, I would say it's not just important, but it is probably right now the most important thing, because as you say, we've got these incredible tools and they can do a larger amount of the work than we're used to. That human connection becomes more and more important as well.
Unless the name of the podcast, like, I think technology should be for humans and not the other way around. And I think we will also have a role to play in making sure that we shape the tools and the processes to help us as humans, and not the other way, like just being tracked because that's better for someone somewhere, right? But yeah, I think it's really, right now it's probably not a very I'm not sure if it's good or bad. Certainly doesn't feel very optimistic sometimes, the technology right now, but I think we'll see the light eventually. And I think changes always have been part of our career. And I think we'll just have to figure out how to use what's available right now and just keep rolling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Tell me, Javier, why did you decide specifically Ruby community needs a specific forum? I mean, obviously there's X and there's Blue Sky and Discord, and there's lots of different avenues of communication. The least of which is obviously live in-person events and conferences. Why did you decide, okay, we need to actually have a forum here where we can discuss whatever we want to discuss, technical or not technical?
Yeah, so last year when I started going back to Ruby, because some of the other technologies I was working on dried up a bit. So what I noticed is yes, there was a lot of things happening in the Ruby community, but a lot of those conversations and things were happening either in closed forums, which you would have to be part of it and would be hard to, sometimes it's hard to be in 10 Slacks and 20 Discords. And the other part is, I think there's a lot of events happening in person, but I felt that we didn't have a proper forum like other languages have, like Elixir, Go, Rust, all the Python, all the other languages have really big and interesting forums, and I couldn't find one for Ruby and say well, I think we probably have an opportunity here, and that's why I partnered with Gemma last year and decided to launch the Ruby forum. And the idea, sometimes people ask me, why, if we already have Reddit and Blue Sky, why do we need a forum? I think it has some advantages in terms that one is public and searchable, so you don't have to repeat a lot of the things that are happening. The second one is it can be more friendly for new users or newcomers, and also the tools of the forum are also very good for avoiding spam and bad actors and all that. So we're using Discourse, and it basically has I think more than 10 years running forum, so we can have this asynchronous conversation also, where we have people in Australia, we have people in Europe, we have people in America and all over the world. And I think the forum allows you not having to be present at the same time, and you can have a discussion over several days versus a chat where you have to be present, or otherwise when you come online, the conversation has already moved on to another topic, and it would be weird just to come back and say something about it.
Yeah, I can tell you my answer on that question. And I use a lot of social media, but the problem is if you want to see discussions around Ruby and you want to understand people's opinions or what are they building or what questions do they have, it's almost impossible on traditional social media. You will see large voices because they have more followers or likes or whatever it might be. So you'll see their communication coming through. But if you're a small account holder and you have a question and you want to just ask the community, it's very hard to do, to be seen, to be heard. And even then when you are, you still have to go through people who might the wrong opinions, bad opinions, people from outside the community wanting to have an opinion, and it doesn't work well. It's very difficult to ask a technical question and get a response which is not offensive as you might get on, say, Reddit.
Yeah. Also, you have the limitation of how many characters and stuff. So if you wanted to share links or a piece of code or things that are more comprehensive, it's hard to do that. And I totally agree that it's a democratization part where everyone can have the same voice, the same level. And that's one thing that I don't like about Reddit, for example, where you can get like downvoted, or then you start with all these wars about who's wrong and who's right. And I think, I mean, it obviously sometimes it's part of what the community needs to talk about, but also I think having a space to have technical discussions and having a space to talk about what things we like to do, how we work, I think that's also very important.
Well, what's the growth trajectory been like of the forum? Like, you're seeing new users every day?
Yeah, so we're basically, I checked last week and we're already the most active forum in the Ruby community. So I think that's great in just like 6 months. So we're growing quickly, but also steadily. We're not trying to like reach a specific number. We're already like 350 users, and I think realistically, I think we could reach around 1,000 by the end of the year. But I think more important that the number is like being able to generate those conversations and being able to bring people together that are sharing interesting things and stuff. Like, it's obviously harder to measure, but I think for me it's more important to have something that's valuable for the community than having to reach some vanity metrics.
One of the things I'm concerned about, Javier, is when we're using tools that are a little bit abstracted from us to write the code, that's probably putting it mildly, that the amount of time we spend solving actual technical problems becomes less and less. And that doesn't mean developers don't do that. They definitely do. Like, there's still tough problems that we have to solve ourselves. But because those moments are more rare, the solutions to them become less obvious. Like, they don't get as much airtime as they possibly should. Would we hope that a forum like this would solve that? Like, do you want people to post, hey, I had this problem and here's how I solved it?
Yeah, I think there's a space for both, because before I saw it, like before we had Google and Stack Overflow, which obviously were not as efficient as asking an LLM, but you always had the opportunity to just go and Google it and find it on the documentation. But I think what happens is, like, there's certain conversations and certain questions that you actually want someone else's point of view, right? Like, if you're building something new or you're building a tool for Ruby developers, you don't want like the generic response of this tool is very cool, it's going to be valuable from a machine. You actually want feedback that is real from people using it on the real world. So I think that's where we can provide value for either people that are open source contributors that are building, but also like people that are working on projects and maybe they already tried to fix it or several ways and using several tools. And I think sometimes it's a matter of finding a different perspective or finding a different just a different experience, seeing it from a different angle. I think that helps a lot. And I think you cannot, obviously, I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe I'm wrong in 6 months, but I do think that the human experience and being able to know how things work, it's going to be important. And I think, especially for if we think about the community of people that have different backgrounds, different levels of experience, I think there's always going to be valuable to interchange talk and have discussions about things, because you'll see it from different points of view. And obviously someone that has several years of experience are going to have more things, but also someone that is new to the language or that is just entering the career, they also have interesting insights because they come with a fresh pair of eyes, and sometimes that's also very valuable and helpful for the community as a whole.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Are there certain challenges of trying to establish a forum like this that caters to someone who's been programming in Ruby for over a decade, as opposed to someone that might have discovered Ruby last week because, maybe they heard that it was more token efficient and so they've started using Ruby? Like, are there challenges in that?
Yeah, I think obviously we're still trying to find where and how we can help more, but I think one thing that I noticed is there's a lot of good projects and documentation from 10 years ago that haven't kept up with the pace and they are just outdated. So a lot of newcomers struggle a little bit because they say, well, I found this book that is pretty nice, but it says Ruby 2 or Ruby something like that, or Rails 5 or whatever was used back then. And I think that challenge, over the last year, I think there's been a lot of interesting initiatives. I've heard about this Ruby Renaissance, and I agree. I think there's a lot of interesting things happening in the community that we probably didn't have a couple of years ago. So I think I feel like there's a lot of new energy in the community.
I agree.
So I think obviously the forum is part of that, but I think also there's a lot of interesting projects happening, like just rubyevents.org is pretty nice project, like the things that the Gen Hoop project is doing, like RV, and just having this other way of having gems. And I think they have brought interesting things that we don't have right now, like namespaces or cooldowns. And I think we all benefit from having more and not from having less. So
I agree. Yeah.
We should strive for diversity of ideas, and I think we all win.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of the things that, obviously the language itself, but there's a reason why people are attracted to Ruby. And one of the reasons, which you touched on earlier, is the community itself. And the community is robust, and it has always benefited from a lot of communication and a lot of, obviously kindness to each other, but in that having opinions, in having, let's try this and let's go in this direction, and I think we can improve this gem and things like that. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think also like the weird part of Ruby, or thinking differently, I think that's also part of the ethos of the community. Like, I think you'll find really interesting and cool projects. Like, some people do gaming, some people do just embedded systems, and I think a lot of people are trying to push the language into places that it wouldn't be suitable for. But like, I think as Rubies, we just don't care, and we just try to do it, and we try to make it work. And I think it also goes the other way. Like, I think we were talking earlier, like these big companies like Shopify or Stripe, they also are making Ruby more efficient, and it's running at a scale that probably small businesses and solo developers probably don't need, but also we all benefit from having a language that is faster and more secure, right? So I think I think the doing things differently in the Ruby community is very, very cool. And also, I think there's a lot of people that are probably not using Ruby every day, but they still feel part of the Ruby community, and they sometimes do side projects, or they just go to the events because they like the vibes and hanging out with other people. So I've met a lot of people that they consider themselves Rubyist, and even if they don't use it every day. And I think that's a good approach. Like, that's why also the name is Ruby Users Forum, because I mean, if you use it once and you like it, like, you're welcome to come and hang out. Like, I don't care if you're using it 24/7 or if you just like it once because you run a script and was useful for you.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. In fact, I speak to people who are, who are Ruby developers, but they might not have developed anything for several years. Like maybe their position currently is they're a CTO, or maybe they're a developer in TypeScript or something else completely, but they still consider themselves a Ruby developer, and they still have their community. Like they still love their friends and their community.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think it's pretty common, especially because Ruby is obviously not as popular as it was some years ago, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think probably the most popular language battle is already lost, but I think Ruby can still be a very useful and used language, even if it's not number one or two, right?
I like positioning Ruby against Python.
Yeah, you don't like Python?
No, it's not that I don't like Python. No, not at all. In fact, in doing what I do, I have to use many different languages in what I do, but I don't hate Python. But I think that's a fair comparison to make. Like it's a fair positioning of Ruby.
Yeah,
it's an alternative to Python, in particular when we're discussing machine learning.
Yeah, I think it has a lot of similarities with Python. And obviously, like if people are already using Python, I think, it's a easier sell to use Ruby. And I think there's a lot of places, and I don't think it's going anywhere. But yeah, as I said, like maybe I'm wrong, and we're gonna rewrite everything in JavaScript in like 6 months. But I don't think so, because I still think that as the same way as we have different languages in the world, and obviously we all, well, not all, but a lot of people speak English because it's easier to communicate with people in other places. We still have like different languages and different cultures, and I think it's part of just how people like to solve problems in different ways. And I think that's normal. And I think also it's normal as technologists, as you mentioned, like we use different tools, right? I think I consider myself a Ruby, but I also have programming in JavaScript or Java or Python or like whatever it's needed and the best tool for the job, I'll use it. But also like there's some tools that I like or that I enjoy more, or sometimes my way of thinking and my way of working are just more aligned with Ruby. It's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It's just that I find that resonance with how it works and how it reads and writes.
Yeah. And just finally talking about the forum, do we want to make it a safe space to talk about anything? Like if I wanted to talk about, I don't know, the employment or the future, or like is there room in the forum to touch on topics other than Ruby, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have some categories like announcements, learning resources, community, and asking for help. But we also have this general all catch-all category, and sometimes we discuss like the World Cup or how to be more healthy as a developer, or I think one of the most controversial topics was about coffee, and everyone shared how coffee should be drink. Yeah, I think there's a space for everything. I mean, obviously, we want to make it a safe space and that everyone feels welcome. But other than that, I think we can talk about anything.
Yeah, just reminds me, one of the topics that I think we need to talk more about is physical health of developers. In particular, I'm discovering this as I get older, that I am starting to get wrist problems or arm problems because of having that position. You can't see this, but I'm holding my hands like this. Like you hold your hands in one position on a mouse and on a keyboard all day, for 8 hours straight. And if it's not the right position, you can end up with problems. And I don't know. It's something that I think should be discussed more.
Yeah, I think there was a conversation about like vacations and how to take time off. There's also another one about like healthy routines, because I think we spend a lot of time sitting down, and I think it's important sometimes just to be active and move yourself around. But yeah, I think that's part of the idea. I think we're still humans and we're still like complete beings. So I think it's fine to talk about everything. Obviously, we probably won't be discussing like very specific things about like triathlon or things like that, because probably there's other forums for that.
But why not? Like, why not? I mean, I'm assuming this is part of your life.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, there's this Ruby triathlon, which is going to 3 different conferences in Europe, which I always wanted to do, and I hope one day I can go. So basically, you have to attend those 3 conferences in the same year, which is pretty cool because they're close by in Europe. And in the space of 2 weeks, you have to go to those 3 conferences.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's great, and I think that's also what I like, for example, about meetups and conferences, that you also get to know people about what they like to do in their normal life. Like some people like to go running, some people like drinking coffee, some people like food, and I think obviously it's a very complementary space because being in person is very different from being online, but I think it also can serve like the same purpose of feeling connected and finding a place where you can share you can share things and you can learn with others.
Absolutely. The forum is something that takes obviously a lot of time. You had to build the platform that it's on. I'm assuming it's not off the shelf, is it? You've built it. You've custom built it, haven't you?
No, it's an open source platform.
Okay.
So it's called these cores, and we're using like the hosted version because I don't want to be dealing with the server being down or like having some misconfiguration. So basically, we just pay for it to be run. But the platform is open source, and it's actually built in Rails. So that's also
okay. Awesome. There's still work to set it up. There's work to maintain it. There's obviously costs involved with all of that. And then you have to promote it. You have to get users on board. I expect there's work around moderation as well, although probably less than a lot of other forums. But this is all at expense to yourself. Why do you do that? Like, what's in it for you? Or is there nothing in it for you?
Yeah, well, the first is because I really thought that the community needed the space, and I felt that with the experience that I had, I could pull it off. Obviously, there's always the possibility that it doesn't work, but worst case scenario, I say like, well, worst case, I learned something new and I see that it doesn't work. So I think it's my way of contributing back to the community. And obviously, I would love to find a way to make it self-sustainable because, as you mentioned, it's not only just paying for the server, but I think the outreach to other communities, like the moderation, like we also try to curate some content because obviously we don't want to give more work to the open source maintainers, so we just try to publish things for them, and also keeping the forum safe from spam and like other types of like hate speech and all that. So I think most of the work is going to be around building the community and not necessarily like the tools, which there's also obviously a cost. But I think the more we can make it self-sustainable, I think the more we can grow. And also, I don't want it to be dependent on me having free time, and more being something that can be run in the long term, like But I hope it's still running in 10 years and we don't lose all that discussion and thoughts that are happening and they just get lost in the cyberspace.
It's an interesting point, and one that I was thinking about recently. It's probably because I read something recently about this, but we have thousands of Ruby gems that are being relied upon by businesses every day, and many of those businesses perhaps don't know that those gems are maintained by a small number of people. Like, you have a Ruby gem that is maintained by maybe 2 or 3 people, sometimes less. Maybe it's just one person. Mm-hmm. And the concept of the continuation of what happens, like if that person retires or moves on, what happens to that gem? And, we see it often. They go into a graveyard and businesses have to replace them and so on. But sometimes they don't know that, and the old version continues on through time with its flaws and with security concerns. And that idea of continuation is an interesting one in open source.
Yeah, and I think obviously also with the LLMs and all that, where you can just basically build projects using open source technologies. Before you would go and clone a project, now you can just regenerate it from scratch, and obviously it's using the open source projects on the background to generate that code. But yeah, I think that's something that not only in Ruby but as open source, that how do you balance like this free and open market with obviously businesses having real needs of security and maintenance and all that. And it's obviously a question I don't have an answer for, but I think there's some different solutions and people, and I think as long as it's something that provides value, I think it's good to see different approaches of how to solve that problem. Like, I think some people say like, well, we're just going to maintain the gems that we use as a company, and that's how we are going to make sure that they are still maintained. I think that's one way of doing it. The other is like obviously sponsorships or just funds that go to these projects that are important for the community. And the other is like this pro tier or like premium tier, where if you're a business and you have need of not just using it for yourself, then you have to pay like for a license, which I think also can be interesting.
Yeah, because the option will be, well, I just won't use it then and I'll find something else. But you bring up a very good point, which is when we're using an LLM, we go to build something and you send the prompt off to Codex or Claude or what have you, and the code gets built. And part of that is certain gems get installed. And beyond running a bundle install, I don't know that there is much thought put into what gem is being used. Now, just last year, I would have considered what gem should I use here? Should I use this gem, or let's go and research and find the best gem for this application? And now, the 40 gems or whatever are bundled into the application. You don't know what gems are in there, and you might never know.
Exactly.
That's a problem.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with that, but yeah, I do think that obviously code has always been like the easy part. I think the maintenance and the care of, like, for example, like an open source maintainer, they know what features make sense for the gem, right? And I think that's something like building the roadmap and making it secure and making sure that it provides what you need, and also saying no to features that probably are just going to be more bloat. That's important work. And I think that's also in another layer. I always say like the best code is not writing any code, and sometimes you just have to do a lot of pushback, because either obviously right now it's very easy to say like build this, build that, but at the end of the day, it's like, can you get the same result without building or coding anything? And I think the cost of maintenance is always several orders of magnitude higher than what it takes you to build the first time. So I think we always have to be very conscious of like, it's not only the cost of building the code, it's the cost of running it in the long term.
Maintaining.
Yeah,
Absolutely. The code still matters. You know, I have this viewpoint that I say from time to time, which is, you know, the most important thing is the end result. You're writing an application, it has to do something, and that's what the client cares about. The client doesn't really care about the code, but that doesn't mean that the developer shouldn't care about the code.
Yes, I think it's like when you go to a restaurant, it's like obviously you don't care, but like if they serve you like a dish of garbage, like you would definitely complain. So I think obviously then client doesn't care like what specific spices you use or what type of lettuce you use, but if you're the chef and you're the owner and you're responsible for it, like you have to make sure that you're putting out something that is good. And I think I agree with you, like that's still your responsibility. And you need to make sure that what you're giving your end client is good, at least good in whatever means in that particular context and client and necessity or project, but still needs to be something that you consider at least not harmful or at least beneficial in some way.
Yeah, but writing code that you can be proud of is still important. Even if you have a tool doing some of that for you or all of that for you, you still have to take full ownership and responsibility for that code.
Yeah, because at the end, someone's going to be running it and someone's going to get called when things go wrong. At least in the short term, that's still what happened. Like, if something goes wrong, someone needs to fix it. And I think that's where you don't want just to push it like it is and just don't care about what's going to happen later. But we'll see. I think there's been a lot of attempts to automate the job. I think obviously this time feels different because I've seen some really amazing, intelligent people do amazing stuff with this. But I also see a lot of risks and a lot of things that can and will go wrong. So I think, I think it's still an open question. I try to make no guesses, and I just try to keep up with what's happening and try to use the best tool for the job. Because at the end of the day, obviously, if there's something that can help me do my work better, I'm gonna see and learn more about it. But also, like, if there's something that I'm not sure it's gonna be better, I would rather wait and see where it lands and then go from there. Because I think what's weird about AI right now, particularly in the development stage, is that we're all being forced to be early adopters, in which I think it feels a little wrong because, I mean, I obviously have been sometimes an early adopter, but also, like, I know, like, it comes with risks and it comes with, sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't pay off. So I think it's normal for people to use the technology in different ways and with different levels of commitment because we all have different needs and necessities, and obviously also we cannot be exposed to the same risk. Like if we're a bank or if we're dealing with medical records, like it's not the same as if I'm building a site for myself or doing a game where I'm gonna just use it with my family.
Yeah, absolutely. Would it be fair to say that in the development community, we have two types of developers, and maybe there's a grey scale between them, a gradient scale between them, but we have at one end developers, people who work on their project, consume and produce code, And at the other end, we have contributors, people who perhaps are developers as well, but provide back into the community. And that's a different type of person because they're considering the larger community, maybe not all of the community, but a larger group than just themselves or the business that they work for. You're obviously a contributor. Is it fair to say that there's those two types?
Yeah, I would say definitely there are different layers, and I think the different ways of using the technology. I think, as you mentioned, like you can be a user of the technology where you just take it, use it, and then don't care about it. And there's also different levels of being involved where if you're building the tool or if you're, basically I think if you're building tools, then yes, you need to be more involved in what, I think it's pretty much the same. Like, if you're a user of the Ruby language, it's not the same as if you're someone working in the language. Like those are two different domains and two different problems. And I think obviously they talk to each other, but yeah, I think in terms of development, I think there's just very different specializations, and it also depends on what you're doing and what you want to do. And I think it's totally fine, like to have different people doing different things because otherwise,
of course, yeah.
we will be doing the same thing.
Yeah. And look, there's many different ways to give back to the community too. My viewpoint is that if you're an employee or a hobbyist, you perhaps have a lower responsibility, and it doesn't mean none, but a lower responsibility. But if you own a business or you run a business or you're an executive managing a business that makes its money from using Ruby or indeed any other language or framework, that you have a responsibility, a duty to give back. And there's many ways of giving back. It could be in terms of sponsorship, absolutely. But it could be in terms of, say, running a Ruby forum, or it could be in terms of doing sessions at conferences. You know, like there's many different ways of giving back to the community.
Yeah,
that's my take.
Yeah, I think always, like, I agree with you. It can also start with internally, like you can also train people or help them make their journey easier, like just paying for books or paying for courses or sponsoring projects in the community or allowing people to go to conferences, events. I think it doesn't have to be something in particular. I think as long as you're helping people and you're helping the overall community, that I think it's fine. You can find your own way to participate, but yes. I think we all gain from giving and receiving, like, because otherwise it's like the commons problem, where if we all just take and nobody puts things back, then we're gonna end with nothing. It's just keeping the balance.
Yeah. In your role as a consultant in your business, how have things changed over the last 6 months for you?
In particular for me, it hasn't changed a lot because most of my job nowadays is telling clients what not to do and just pushing back on things that they want to do. But I think over the last years, I've been more in like the consulting, like helping clients figure out what they need. And I think that hasn't changed.
Okay.
But I do see a lot of changes. I do see a lot of people that previously wouldn't be without a job that are now looking for one. So I do see two trends in particular. One, I think obviously the market is not good. So there's a lot of people looking for opportunities. And the other thing is, I think for newcomers is particularly a bad situation because I don't think there's a lot of people hiring or training people, because you can get a lot of value from having senior people using LLMs or just tools, automation. And I think I feel like we probably are going to be uh, as a field in problems in a few years, because if nobody knows how things work, maybe we will have to reinvest in training and reinvest in the basics and fundamentals. But I think right now, as a consultant, one thing that has changed is that the market, I think some years ago, I didn't have to do any sales or marketing. Clients would come, and it doesn't matter how bad I was at selling, like they would buy because they had the need.
Because they're buying your expertise, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which right now I think it's more like a normal industry where if you want to sell, like you need to add some differentiator, you need to find a niche, you need to find the problems of your clients, and it's just you need to go the extra mile to be able to be at the same place where before it was, I think, very easy to sell software.
Do you think that in a few months' time, or 6 months or 12 months, that we're going to be, as consultants, we're going to be fixing up some of the problems that were generated, and I use that word very precisely, generated by executives? You know, like I have seen this. I've seen CTOs who aren't really developers themselves. You know, maybe they were 20 years ago, going, oh, I can fix this problem, writing the prompt, fixing the problem, and that we're going to, you know, then we have to go in and fix that. Is this a trend you think will happen?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I think definitely we will, because I think there's a lot of context that you need to, again, like a lot of context that you need to take into consideration when implementing a technology. And I think right now we're trying to fix everything with that. And I think sometimes you just need to take a step back. And I think we've seen this before, like when we had the agile and extreme programming, like that I would consult clients that said, like, I want everyone to do TDD tomorrow. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, people don't know how to write tests. People don't have their code committed to a repository. They don't have any CI pipeline. We need to start with the basics, and maybe someday you will reach there, but you're starting with the wrong solution at the wrong time, right? And I think that's part of what's happening right now. Like, you cannot force or do a mandate of like fix everything with this and just walk away. I think there's some underlying problems that you need to consider and take care of first before you even consider like doing some automation or agents or things like that. So also I think it's the same thing that has happened with other technologies, like when everyone's using React because that's what Facebook is using, or that type of thing where everyone thinks that's the solution for everything. But I think that's the wrong way to see it. And I think you need to say, like, well, what problem I have, what circumstances I'm in, and then from there you go and choose which technologies or which tools you can use to move forward from where you are. But if you don't stop to think about where you are and what problems you have, there's no way you can just jump into a ship and a rocket and go to the moon. Like, it's not going to happen. And I think I think you're already seeing it, but I think the mood is changing a bit in terms of these technologies, and people are being more cautious now than it was like some months ago. So I think, probably next year it's going to be efficiency and clean up and just going back to fundamentals.
A little bit more pragmatic about it, a little bit more.
And what I would say, like, I think when there's a lot of uncertainty, one thing you can do is just put your effort in things that would be beneficial, but even if it goes away or if it become something transformative. So I think investing in efficiency, investing in security, investing in people, and having the right tools and having the right environment, that's going to be more important than being able to use the latest model or the latest harness or the latest thing. Like, just find what works for you and then invest in the fundamentals. And I think one thing that has been a recurrent theme is like things that were important 20 years ago are still important right now, and they are just more important because it's just exponential.
I completely agree with you. A lot of people listening to this podcast will know of the incredible book, The Pragmatic Programmer. And if you read that today, it holds up. It holds up. You can open that book at almost any page, read a paragraph and go, yeah, that's still true. Even though when that was written, there was no consideration given to LLMs or to AI or anything even remotely like that. But every word of it still holds up.
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely still recommend that book. Like if you're getting started with programming or you haven't read it, like definitely a lot of things hold on. Obviously, the tools are a little different right now, but I think the ideas are still valuable. And I think it's the same for books like the Phoenix Project or Extreme Programming. Like, I think those ideas are gonna still be valuable, even if we don't touch any line of code and it all gets generated. The ideas of how you build systems and how you think about automation, I think that's gonna still be something that's gonna be valuable.
Absolutely. Is there advice that you have heard along the way that you think doesn't apply now, or that maybe was always wrong?
So, I mean, that's a good question, but I mean, I think obviously we've been wrong a lot of times. Like we were doing a waterfall, and then we were doing agile, and then we were doing pair programming, and I think it's not that it's wrong. I think it's just that you have to find what works for you and your particular context. Like you cannot just go and replicate what worked for someone else. I think it's more important for you to see it like, okay, this is the experience and this is the insights that these people have being in that particular moment, and then just translate it to your particular context. Because you cannot learn from others. Like you have to go and do it and then see what works for you and what doesn't.
It's an interesting point. In my current business, I'm consulting businesses just on their tech stacks, and no two businesses are the same. So the solution that works for one business is not necessarily the same thing that's going to work for the next one. Like no two are the same. I mean, there's fundamentals that remain the same about, data security and things like that, but the actual solution and how you implement is different in every case.
Yeah, exactly. Probably that's the takeaway. Like thinking that a solution is universal, I think that's probably not correct. I think there's always going to be different solutions for different types of problems, and I think that's fine. Like you can have an ecosystem of different tools, different languages, different types of work, and what works to send rockets to the moon, it's probably not the same that's going to work for building web applications or building games. So it's just fine. Like just find whatever works for you, whatever you like, and then try to be better at that. And don't try to copy or. I think there's no universal playbook we can follow. Like it's just a journey.
Javier, what excites you about the future?
I mean, obviously, going back to the moon is one thing. But no, honestly, I do think that that's pretty cool because I think we sometimes forget to do crazy things or things that seem impossible. So I think what excites me is what we don't know which is coming. Like, I think we have some ideas of what might be happening, but I think if we go back 10 years, we would probably feel that we're living in the future right now. So I'm excited of what things we don't know today that in 10 years are going to be like just normal day-to-day stuff. And I think the ability of humans of just coming up with new things of working together, I think that's pretty exciting. And the other thing is, I would think, and I'm trying to be an optimist, that we'll find a way to have like a more green planet, like that we are able to finally be in peace and in equilibrium with nature, because I do think that we have gone pretty far in terms of just consuming and polluting. And I think just finding a way where we can be in this planet and just knowing that in 100 years we can still be here and have no issue.
Yeah, that's right. Even if the way that we program and develop, and maybe Ruby's not even around, but the planet definitely is.
Yeah, exactly. But guys, I mean, I don't know. I think what I always like about technology is working with other people, and I think the idea of sharing that progress with others, I think that's pretty great. And also there's this phrase that the future is not evenly distributed. So I think the more we can make it more distributed and reach more people, I think that's also a good thing, like making sure every progress that we make can reach the largest amount of people.
That's perfect. That's a great note to end on. I always have one last question, which is there anything you wanted to say and I didn't let you say, like anything else you need to tell me in this podcast?
No, I mean, obviously, go check out the Ruby forum. Like, obviously, the best way to help us is to participate and add some discussions in the forum. And also, we do have some options for sponsorships or individual supporters. So go check those out. But in the end, I think just spreading the word and participating there, I think that's the best way to collaborate and contribute.
Fantastic. Yes, absolutely. As I said, link will be in the notes in the description for this podcast. Javier, thank you very much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
No, thanks to you for inviting me and for having me, and I think it was a great conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice one.